What is up, health enthusiasts? It's Coach Lamby here for Workin Weights LLC, your guide to strength, health, and all things nutrition. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Dwayne Ulrich, aka Poppy Dwirl.
Right, baby.
And today, we are finishing up our series, and we are going to learn how to read a paper.
Yeehaw!
You know, I put those things in at the end of some of the episodes.
Really?
So like
That's
last
awesome.
time, what was it? I was just editing, yeah. And there's one where you're like, stay alive, stay alive. And I put that in at the end. And then there's a little clip of me where I'm like, well, now that that's out of the way.
That's funny. That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. I was just thinking right before before we logged on, that we need to have bumper music, man. I think like the Peter Gunn theme. Okay, that's going to be one that'll find up at the end of the podcast, I'm sure, right there.
So you don't listen to the podcast then, huh?
I do, but I just was like thinking maybe some different bumper music, like something like Peter Gunn, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Do that.
yeah, or Sanford and Sons. See, you're catching the groove, man. That's perfect. That's perfect. That's perfect. Yep.
Love it. All right. So we're gonna learn how to read paper. I saw something today though that caught my eye here. And talk about it. We don't talk about politics too much here. Florida banning
Yes.
lab-grown meat.
Yes, I was thinking about that. I was like, are we going to talk about that?
We're gonna talk, I mean, just real short here. So it like not even nutrition related, but just from a conservative standpoint, like this seems like a big government move from whom is supposed to be a small government representative.
Yep.
Um, and I'm a little disappointed. Like, what happened to free market capitalism and competition and the consumer demand driving supply? Yeah. So there's that, and it's not even that available in the United States. So, like on the basis of what this ban is, so I'd be interested to know what other foods have been banned in Florida.
Yeah, I when I heard about it, I thought, that's interesting. I don't well, like you said, it's not really even that available. I think it's still
Yeah.
kind of in its infancy, at least here in the United States. I think that just the concept of it, and this is stuff that you and I've talked about, but just the concept of it is kind of off-putting to some people until you start looking at the processes and the efforts that go into the science and to the actual production. So just when you hear about it, lab-grown meat, the first thing that comes up in their mind, and it's come up in my mind before as well, like, oh, are we cloning animals? It's
Hmm.
like the next thing you know, they're going to be people, and you just irrational kinds of ideas. But you and I took a deep dive off. I don't even know if we did that on a podcast. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was podcast.
Yeah, we took a pretty deep dive off there on their process and uh, their efforts to maintain what's the word? It's like sterile environments.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Nothing,
They're not
not
making cancer,
they're not making
basically.
cancer.
Yeah.
They're not making COVID. Um, and it's not going to make you grow up and have, your children have 3 heads and 16 fingers or anything. So it's misunderstood right
Bottom.
now. And so I don't know. I think that's it. Either that or somebody in the that wrote the legislation has a what's the word I'm looking for? I'll just say a lobbyist
Hmm. Hmm.
that's pushing to keep that out of their market.
Yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, it does seem to me like it's just I mean, you're artificially uh what's the word? Like decreasing the competition to support the animal agriculture industry. And that's not really the way that our economy is supposed to work.
Right,
Yeah, and so we went over the science of it, and we went over some of the objections people have,
right.
and it basically boils down to I think that the process is yucky.
Yep,
And that's the only basis on which they could ban the thing right now, because it's not like, just doing a quick search here, like I can't even order it. I
yeah,
don't even know where I would buy it.
right.
So and there certainly isn't any health outcome data on the stuff. I don't even know because it is meat. Like it's molecularly identical.
Right, right,
And it starts from, the cells of animal meat, and it's
right,
just the same process of how that would grow in an animal. It's just done in a vat under controlled circumstances. And yeah, so I don't even know on the basis of what they're banning this other than just to support the animal ag. So
yeah. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything that was a negative. That was like, okay, it's found to cause children to be hyperactive or ADD or um, I just found no. I found no negatives that they put out there. Just nothing. It just
yeah, and it has FDA approval for sale, and not that the actual meat itself has FDA approval, but the process to make the meat has FDA approval, right?
right,
Which
right,
which means that the process to make it has been deemed safe.
right.
And so therefore the product itself would be safe to consume, would be under the grass, generally regarded as safe.
Right. So all I knew was is that it was I just read something. I know you're going to bring it up, but I'm going to beat you to it.
Okay.
All I read was, or I saw on the news, and then all I read was that it was just being banned. But on this article, you see the fine print there, right? Guy wants to make it a second
A second
degree
degree misdemeanor,
misdemeanor.
yeah,
That
to
would be a
sell or
right.
distribute it.
That would be a class B misdemeanor in the U.S. I mean, in
Hmm.
Texas, not the U.S., but in Texas, that would be a class B misdemeanor. But just to sell it, that's crazy. I mean, people get lower punishments for
Yeah.
selling dope, you know?
Yeah, like you get caught with what it depends on the state, but so much marijuana under a certain amount, and it's just like you don't even get a class B misdemeanor for that.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
So some of
Exactly.
this stuff is wild. So now that we're talking about laws and stuff, and making it a second degree misdemeanor to sell or distribute it, and then on the flip side of this, there is a huge push to to decrease the laws on raw milk distribution.
What?
So yeah, so people want so because certain states and even counties within states will either allow or not allow the sale and distribution of raw milk. And then there are and so there's a huge push from that community to, hey, let's get this opened up in all 50 states so that we can have raw milk on the supermarket floor, just right, like right next to pasteurized milk. And so I wonder what the laws are for that. And so that's something to look up later, I guess. So what's the deal with raw milk in Florida?
Man, I don't know. I don't know.
Because if they allow that, but they're gonna put a second degree misdemeanor on this, I think that there is a little bit of a contradiction happening there. So
Crazy, crazy
Crazy
stuff.
stuff. All right, man. I think I'm just going to share my desktop because we might go back and forth here. All right. My node. Can you see the mind node?
I see it from a distance. Perfect. Right
Here
there.
we go.
Perfect.
All right. We're going to talk about reading a paper. Oh, actually, little review here. All right. Tell them what you're going to
Oh
tell
my
them.
gosh.
Tell them what you told
Oh
them.
my gosh.
So, a little review on our fallacies. These will be the informal fallacies. So, this will be a bit easier. All right, so we'll just go through a couple of these for a review. So, fallacy number one, until you show me a 50-year randomized control trial showing otherwise, I will continue to believe that steak is healthy. So, we have multiple choice here. What do you think? I don't know if you remember everything. Some of these I don't think we put in there, but
Um, well, I don't know. I'm just I've slept since then. Just came face to face with lightning bolts. But
let me
well, we'll
see.
go back to it. Oh, you took it away.
All right, here you go.
I feel like there's a red herring issue there. I know you may not agree with that. I don't think equivocation is it, but I don't think that it's yeah, I'm gonna throw out red herring.
Red herring. Okay, so did we go over what a red herring is?
Yeah, briefly.
Okay.
It
So
was in
why do
that
you think
it was in that well, I think that it's so instead of talking about how it's healthy because there's so many other there's so much more to that conversation that just throwing this I need to see a 50-year randomized control trial showing otherwise. There's no 50-year randomized control on study on anything. And I think that that's a distraction and the person doesn't want to listen to anything else. I don't
okay.
know. Could be an
So I
appeal to
think
ignorance,
yeah,
but
appeal to ignorance. And this is I got this from somebody else, by the way. I didn't come up with this.
mhm,
So for me, this is an appeal to ignorance because they're basically saying specifically because it has not been proven by a 50-year randomized control trial
mhm.
to be unhealthy, therefore it is healthy. So it's appealing to their ignorance, right?
Okay,
Or
right,
appealing to ignorance in general.
right,
Uh, it's not an equivocation because an equivocation would be having different definitions for the same thing.
right.
And then you might be able to say appeal to nature. However, I don't think that they're saying that steak is healthy on the
Yeah,
basis that it's natural, right?
yeah, I don't,
They're
yeah,
just
not at
they're just
all.
saying it hasn't been shown to be unhealthy
Right,
by this criteria, therefore it is healthy.
right.
All right. You can tell me all you want that Liver King is on steroids. It just sounds ridiculous to me, and I refuse to believe it. Do, 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 do,
Appeal
do,
from
do. Incredulity.
incredulity. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
I agree with you there. Yeah.
yeah,
So it's not an equivocation because they're not
right,
providing different meanings for the same
right.
thing.
Yep,
It's not muddying the waters because they're not setting up the argument beforehand,
right,
by telling you things are going to be bad specifically. It's not a
right,
genetic fallacy because they're not saying, well, this person has been known to say X, Y, and Z, therefore you can't believe anything. So
right,
appeal from incredulity. So they're just incredulous, right? I can't see how it's
right,
possible. And so
right.
I refuse to believe it. Yeah. And then, oh, oddly enough, here, look at this. We know that industrial frankenfoods made in factories are bad for you because they're not foods that you grow yourself from the soil. Well, this one's a little bit harder here. What do you think?
Uh, well, a part of it, I feel like there's an appeal to nature there, but I'm
Hmm.
trying to remember what straw man was.
So straw man is where you misrepresent someone else's argument to make it easier to defeat.
Oh, okay, good. Because so that it's not that. I'm just predominantly on the appeal to nature
Okay. So I
because they're
think,
going the
yeah,
foods that you grow yourself from the soil. They're making the point that that's good for you,
right.
whereas something that's made in a factory is not good for you. So
Yeah,
I'm appeal to nature.
right. Yes, it's bad specifically because it wasn't grown in nature.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think this partially could be a little bit begging the
Begging the
question.
question, I thought about that too, but
Yeah, because yeah, so because they're labeling the health of this,
right.
it's unhealthy because we know that it's unhealthy,
Yeah.
basically,
So
right?
we could, so
Yeah.
yeah. So we could go A and C then, which is letter E. I can go with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
I'm
A
with
and
that.
C.
I
So
agree.
yeah, so I think A and C on that one.
Hmm.
All right. Yeah, cool. All right, good review.
Good, good, good.
Right. Okay, so reading a paper here. So this is where we're getting down to you're reading something online. Most people don't provide references, but maybe somebody does. And you've gone through these steps in your head, you've formalized their argument. You've used logical inference to, determine whether or not things may or may not be true without looking stuff up right away. Maybe you've got through all of that, and we're to the point now where we need to read a paper, right? We need to read the reference that they've cited. And so we're going to give you some steps here, which you can use to read a paper. Now, this is a skill, just like reading is when you first started learning how to read,
Hmm.
right? It's a skill that you have to do. When you read a scientific paper, this is not a passive reading where we're sitting down and maybe we're reading a novel or something. And it's just a passive thing that's happening. You have to be an active participant in what you're doing. Okay. So, but I'm going to give you some outlines here that's going to make things easier. So, in step one, we're looking at some barriers that people have towards reading a paper. A lot of people will be intimidated by it. And some people will try open up a paper and give it a good go, but can't really do it because number one, maybe they lack a background knowledge. So certain things like rodent studies and in vitro studies are going to be very, very technical, and a lot of the words and a lot of the information that you're going to get from it are very technical. So
Yep.
not having a background of knowledge within that space
Right.
can be a barrier to reading some of those papers. Lack of confidence, right? You start reading a paper and maybe there's words you've never seen before. You don't know exactly what's happening in this trial. You don't know why. And so you don't have confidence in your ability to make your own decisions from this. It can be overwhelming. Some of these things are incredibly long. The Seven Countries study is a book. That's like
Yeah.
this
Yeah. I
thick.
was. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that the
And
700-page one, wasn't it? 3 or 5.
um,
It's huge,
it's
massive. It was
it's
a
a big,
book.
yeah, it's a book. I mean, you buy it on Amazon, it's $80. It's a book. And then lack of practice. You have to stay up on this. You have to continue reading. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. All right. So when you go into reading a paper, you want to ask some questions beforehand. Okay. So remember, this is an active reading. It's not a passive reading where you just open a book and start reading and everything is kind of given to you by the author. As the author writes the book, that's an active process meant for you to passively read it. Do I need to blow this up?
A little
There
bit.
we
That's
go.
good right there.
All right. So asking questions beforehand is going to help you filter irrelevant info and save you time reading. Okay. So maybe somebody posted a claim on, um, let's say, saturated fat and cardiovascular disease, and then they cite a reference. Okay. And you open up the reference and you start reading the abstract, and we see that um, we'll get into this a little bit. But some of the info or some of the stuff that they're looking at in that specific study really didn't have anything to do with cardiovascular disease, right? Maybe they were just looking at saturated fat and its impact on visceral fat, right? And
Yeah,
so you can skim the abstract and see right away, well, this study is irrelevant to cardiovascular disease because they weren't even looking at cardiovascular disease. Okay. It's also going to help you. So as you start to do your own research, you're going to be able to ask some questions maybe that you want to have answered, right? And that's going to help you save time reading a bunch of papers. So questions, what is the specific research question that you're looking to answer? So just like that, saturated fat and cardiovascular disease, that helps you narrow down kind of your search results that you're looking for. We specifically want to see atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Maybe you're interested in coronary heart disease only. Maybe it's ischemic heart disease only. So having those questions beforehand is going to help you save you a bunch of time in reading papers that aren't going to get you to the answer that you're looking for.
right.
Is this area new to you? For many people, just reading some papers is going to be new. All right. And the more you read, the more familiar you'll become with certain areas. And so as you start reading more and you start branching out, new areas will come to you. What background knowledge do you have? Okay. Maybe you just have a little bit of nutrition knowledge, and that may be something that you need to bone up on. So questions to answer while reading the paper. What is the research question being addressed? One of the problems that we have with over extrapolating information from papers is that a single research trial answers very, very specific questions. So you want to find out what is the research question that is being addressed within this paper. Okay. And some good examples of that is our artificial food coloring stuff, right? So what were
Yeah.
the research questions being addressed? And it wasn't, somebody might take this as just artificial food coloring in children in the broader, sense of general terms. But when we looked at our papers, we were specifically looking at 3 to 4 year
ADHD.
olds
Yep.
regarding ADHD symptoms and behaviors
Right.
in Southampton, UK,
Yep.
with these specific food colors and this
Yep.
specific preservative at these specific doses, right? So there are specific research questions that you're looking to see. What research question is this addressing? Just because it's done in 3 and 4 year olds, does that mean the same thing as in 14 and 15 year olds? Probably not. All right. So, i.e., what is the main hypothesis here? Getting into what we just covered. What are the participants' characteristics? What is the sample size? What is the setting? What is the duration? Right. So if we are maybe looking to find some answers on atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and the duration of the trials we're looking at are 1 to 3 years long, that's not going to be very helpful because atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease takes decades and decades and decades, right? And then regarding the participants, well, if the participants in this 1 to 3 year trial are 35 and 40 year olds, that's not going to be helpful to us either because those aren't the people who suffer from atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. What are the primary outcomes? So if you're looking for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease and the primary outcomes are just regarding, visceral fat or body weight fat, body fat, body weight, but it doesn't really give you, it might even give you serum lipid changes over this 1 to 3. But if there are no outcomes regarding atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, that paper's not answering questions for you. Right. And then what are the results?
Right.
So what happened during this trial? All right. So that's step one. So step one, you're actively going to be asking some questions. Okay. Step two would be survey and skim. Okay. And this is a filter process so that you know what's coming. Okay, you kind of want to be a little bit aware of what's coming up in this paper before you start reading it. And then you also want to be ruthless about the selection of the papers that you're going to read. Because again, you can waste a whole bunch of time on papers that have nothing to do with the question that you're asking or the topic that you're discussing. So you want to be really, really ruthless about which papers you're going to look at in depth. All right. So this is kind of a filter process here. Okay. And so what we're looking to do is filter out a lot of irrelevant stuff and a lot of stuff that isn't going to give us very good answers. And so some things that we may look for is prioritizing human studies over rodent models, right? Human outcome data supersedes anything in a rat study.
Absolutely.
We want to look for reliable and consistent journals. Okay. And just because you've heard of it, this will take time for you to be able to recognize which ones are reliable. So you may have heard of something like the British Medical Journal, which is has brand recognition. You hear it, you've heard of that before. It's probably been said on the news. However, they have been known to publish some junk, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but they are consistent, reliable though, not so much. So authors with on a pre-stated belief or particular, um, who wrote this? So we want to look at authors, okay? So I mentioned this a couple times as we've read stuff. Normally, I'm looking at the last author because that's the supervisor, but the first author is the person who wrote the paper. And so you'll start to become familiar with certain authors who publish within a specific domain. So regarding our food coloring, Stevenson was the supervising author or researcher over most all of those trials that we looked at, right? So you become pretty familiar with those. And then as we read things, especially as I read the FDA committee hearing thing, it start to become pretty clear that Stevenson may have a little bit of a bias towards food coloring. So it's
Right.
something to learn and to keep in mind. You can also Google authors before you start reading the paper, right? Take that first name, throw it in. And there's been a couple times where I've just not even bothered to read a paper because I'll Google the author and something comes up in their bio where it's like, maybe the paper is on dietary cholesterol and heart disease or whatever like the case is, and you Google that first author and their bio comes up as being a plant-based zealot, and it's like, well, this person obviously has a bias, so I'm not really sure how reliable this trial is going to be. You can always go into the methods to find out if it was a reliable trial, but it is something to keep in mind. Reading the abstract, does this paper interact with your research question? Right? So being able to clearly define what it is that you're trying to have answered is going to help you in filtering out reading these papers. And so reading an abstract, not all of them, but a lot of them will give you a good bit of information as to whether or not it's worth your time to even open this thing up further and look into it. Are the results specific to what you're looking for? Again, if you're interested in cardiovascular disease and the results are showing visceral fat and body weight, that doesn't help you out very much, right?
Yeah. I want to say one thing real quick is like typically when I come up with a study that I want to read, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes something that you've pointed out to me, I spend a little bit of time on the abstract myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the first things that I read, and it kind of gives me it kind of guides my ship as to how bad I want to read the study, or what I'm looking for in it. So I went looking around just how the proper way that to write an abstract, and I came up with a statement here that I didn't write this, but I can't really remember exactly where I found it, but it correlates with everything else that I've studied as far as writing an abstract. Before I say that, when some people look at the first time somebody looks at a study, um, some people have never really actually done a research paper
Mm-hmm.
or a bona fide research paper in school, not even in high school or even in college. And so the a study or a publication like that is just foreign to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done tons of research papers, but beside the point. So the abstract does a lot of good for me. And here's something that I've discovered about abstracts. And Coach, I hope this isn't the wrong place to put this, but an abstract should include a statement of the problem you're trying to solve or
Hmm.
study and the purpose of the research, the methods of methodology used to find the solution, the result of the research, and the implications of the findings. It should actually also include, this is so simple, but it should include a thesis statement. And that's just, it's what is this? What's this about? And that's you're going to find that most of the studies that we've looked at, some of the abstracts are just goofy, but the ones that have more validity and that have more weight behind them, the abstract covers most of those things. It covers methodology, it covers purpose, the research, how they did the research, how they
Hmm.
did it to find the solutions, the results, and they gave a little bit of more detail in there. That's why it's not just a paragraph. It's usually an abstract. It's kind of in depth. It's not the study itself, but it's like, okay, here's what we did. Here's how we did it. Here's why we did it. Here's what we think. This is the implication of what we think we found. I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. Good abstracts will have all that information in there. Now, sometimes um, uh, the author who's writing the paper regarding the abstract, depending on where it's going to be published in, they'll only get so many characters to put in an abstract.
That's true.
And
That's
so,
true.
so then you'll get really, really small
That's true.
abstracts that are missing that information. But yeah,
Yeah,
you're
that's
right.
true.
A good abstract, and a lot of them regarding heart disease or something like that, where you'll look at and it might have the purpose and then the objective, and these will be written out in different paragraphs. Then it'll tell you the methods, and then it will tell you the results, and then it'll have their conclusion, and it'll be, three or four kind of short paragraphs that gives you a really, really good indication of what's in the paper. And a lot of times, um, they'll publish in the results section of that. They'll give you the specific outcome that it had. So maybe cardiovascular disease. So this food was found to be, at the highest intake, was found to have a 27% increased risk, and they'll give you the confidence intervals, and then they'll give you the p value, whether it's statistically significant or not. And you can get a lot of information just out of that abstract. And
Right.
so a lot of times that'll save you a whole bunch of time,
Yeah.
not even having to go into the paper to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
the results. And they'll give you the methods, and it'll often tell you, we looked at 134 Chinese students aged 17 to 20 or whatever, like, you know.
Right.
So yeah, definitely.
Even some of the things I just read, I mean, most of that can be put into like a sentence or two. So,
Mhm.
like Coach said, they may have only gotten 500 characters to put it in whatever publication it's going to be, but it doesn't take a whole lot of, time and space to go. We used a double blind
Yep.
test, it's like boom, one sentence. Anyway, go ahead. My
Yeah.
bad.
So we'll do this. We'll look at a paper. So going off of that example that we've been running with about the brain not needing any dietary carbohydrates, and then I was referenced to basically this page right here, right? Generic ketogenic diet search within PubMed. So let's just go through it, and having said what I've said so far, let's apply some of that questions and filtering process and see if this even gets us to where we want to be, right?
Cool.
So
Cool.
some questions to ask beforehand. So what's the specific research question we're looking to answer? Well, we're looking to answer whether or not the human brain can survive without any dietary carbohydrates, right?
Right.
Is this an area that's new to me? Kind of, but not really. I mean, as far as dietary, you know, research goes, it's not brand new to me. Um, the effects on the brain, that would be new to me. What background knowledge do I have? Well, I've been doing this for a little while, looking up all this research. I have this education that I've gotten on my own, not through an institution, but through other things. Um, so for nutrition, I feel pretty confident in my ability to read this. If there's something specific regarding, the brain, then we may have to go to Google to figure out some things. Okay. So what's our research question? We want to know about the brain and zero dietary carbohydrates, right?
Right.
All right. So the first thing we have here, the ketogenic diet pros and cons. Now, just from the title, this may or may not answer our question, right? We can see
Yeah.
a review of ketogenic diet and lifestyle. That's probably not going to answer our question. Ketogenic diet, just in general, I don't know, but we have a sentence here about 1/3 of patients with epilepsy are pharmacoresistant. So meaning they are resistant to medical treatment, drug treatment for epilepsy. So this one might give us something. Ketogenic diet for epilepsy treatment. Okay, maybe. All right. So treatment of neurological disease. So maybe, okay, we have a good start here. So let's look, we'll go specifically to, let's do this one. We're going to go with number 5. And I'm not familiar with any of these authors. So let's look up Damien Dinka.
Swedish. Maybe Swedish or Norwegian.
Let's see. Cop fatally struck a nurse. Oh, goodness. I hope that's not.
That's him, Damien Dinka.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, that's interesting.
Wait. Wait.
Oh, my. Well, look what we've
With
stumbled
gold
on.
antlers.
Oh, geez. All right. Okay. Um,
Wow, with gold
yeah.
antlers.
Silver
Woo.
Honda Accord. Santiago was drunk. Santiago may have thought he hit an animal.
Oh my gosh, he's dead. I
Oh my
feel
goodness.
terrible. I feel terrible
Okay.
now.
Well, all right. Well, we have a few
There he
pictures here.
is.
Damien with his boyfriend.
He's a furry.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. All right. So let's read through the abstract here and see what we have. So we have a gigantic paragraph here to begin
Now I
with.
feel terrible.
So when I come across, yeah, me too. When I come across a big abstract that's written like this, that's just in paragraph form, we might skim through, read the first couple sentences and then the last couple sentences. So over 100 years of study on the favorable effects of ketogenic diet in the treatment of epilepsy have contributed to a long-lasting discussion on its potential influence on other neurological diseases. So this phrasing right here, over 100 years of study on the favorable effects of ketogenic diet. So this might lead us to believe that maybe there's a small amount of bias towards a ketogenic diet by the authors here.
Yeah.
A significant increase in the number of scientific studies in that field has been currently observed. And so that sentence, I'm not really sure what that has to do with anything, right? So this is kind of muddying the waters, we might say.
Yeah, I'm already out on it, by the way.
Right. Yeah. And so let's go down to, let's see if we can find a conclusion here. A frequent advantage of the diet was demonstrated over non-ketogenic diets in the control groups in the therapy of neurological diseases with simultaneous safety and feasibility when conducting the nutritional model. A frequent advantage of the diet was demonstrated over non-ketogenic diets. So this tells me that there are control groups, which is good because we have something to compare this ketogenic diet to. A frequent advantage was demonstrated. Now, it could be that that advantage is very, very small and clinically insignificant, right?
How frequent is it?
How frequent is it? Yep. And so we might skim the center here and say a wide range of mechanisms. blah, 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 influence on inflammatory conditions, reactive oxygen species. So this doesn't give us a lot of specifics. This maybe is just kind of a review article. And I'm sure that there's, let's just stick with this, right? So this is a review article, so they're going to give us other things to look at. Let me see if we can find see now the difference in this title. So between all of these other titles here and the difference in this title, efficacy and safety of a ketogenic diet in children and adolescents with refractory epilepsy.
It's much more specific.
Very, very specific, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So just based on titles alone, I have much more confidence that this paper is going to lead us to results that we may be looking for, right?
Right. Right.
So let's click on this. Epilepsy in the pediatric and adolescent populations is a devastating condition where individuals are prone to recurrent epileptic seizure or changes in behavior or movement that is a direct result of a primary change in the electrical activity in the brain. Although many children with epilepsy have seizures, large percent of them are refractory to drug therapy, may consider initiating a ketogenic diet. So I like this, may consider, right? So it's not definitive language. The term ketogenic diet refers to any diet therapy in which dietary composition results in a ketogenic state of human metabolism. So it defines what a ketogenic diet is. There are 4 major ketogenic diet therapies: the classic ketogenic diet, the modified Atkins, the medium chain triglyceride diet, the low glycemic. And let's go to the last sentence. Although it's apparent that more randomized control trials and long-term studies are needed to evaluate efficacy, side effects, and individual responses to the diet, it's imperative to study and understand the metabolic profiles of patients with epilepsy in order to isolate which dietary restrictions are necessary to maximize clinical benefit. So this is less definitive than the previous one we read, right?
Mhm.
So it's more likely that what we're going to see out of this review is going to be coming from a non-biased angle, right?
Yes.
They're just going to
Yes.
say, here's the
Yes.
review, here's
Yes.
some references, these are the results,
Yes.
right? And this
Yeah.
is kind of how we're interpreting the data. Whereas the other one, you could see there was a little bit of spin put onto
Right.
stuff, right?
Right. Right.
All right. So that's our survey and skim. Okay. So be ruthless about our selection. So we just went through that, just going through a couple of pieces of paper. We can see, we would not read the first one, probably would read the second one. And we're going to be ruthless about it. It might seem, well, you should read them both and get as much information as you can. No, I want to be ruthless about this selection process because I want unbiased results. Right? I don't want somebody's spin on stuff, and I certainly don't want to have to investigate whether or not the methods used are appropriate and whether or not those methods have some amount of spin on them where they might produce the results that the author might want to see, right? I don't want to waste time having to do that. Reliable and consistent journals. Oh, let's see. Where is this published at here? This is published in Nutrients. So Nutrients is a very, very reliable and consistent journal. So +2 on this one, right?
Right.
Read the abstract. Does this paper interact with your research question? Are the results specific to what you're looking for? Now, we are specifically looking at, we might
Low
even
carb.
zero carb. We're
Yeah.
specifically looking for zero carb. Now, he did say that there are 4 different types of ketogenic diets within the literature that they looked at. And so one of them may or may not be zero carbohydrate. But then we think about the main question that we're looking for is, does the brain require glucose for fuel? And so they're doing a review on children and adolescents with epilepsy. Would that actually answer the question of whether or not the brain would be is going to require dietary carbohydrates for fuel? It might not.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're still not ruling out this paper. This still might be something that we would read. There's a possibility that could contain the information that we're looking for. We want to get an idea of the layout. So this is where we want to see where are the methods, where are the results, where are the tables, where are the graphs. So it's just kind of like you're just kind of looking at the topography here, right? So we're going to click on the full text. We're going to open this dude up. We're just going to review. Let's see, we have an abstract, an introduction, overview of what ketone body materials are. We have materials and methods. We have our results. There's a table. We have maybe this is defining what the classic ketogenic diet. Yeah, so we're having definitions of our ketogenic diets. We have efficacy in infants. Here's another diet. We have efficacy, another diet, efficacy, low glycemic index treatment, efficacy. We have another table. All right. And this table doesn't seem to be very big. Some of these tables can be large and you can scroll through them. You want to do that and see if they're large tables. Adverse effects, that's something we're interested in, right?
Right.
Gastrointestinal, we might not be interested in that so much. Cardiovascular, we're probably not interested in that so much for our specific question. Renal and genitourinary. Now, I have never seen this word before. I don't know what it means, but I'm not going to just throw my hands up and say, well, I don't know what that means, so I'm going to skip over this. Okay, so we are going to look up what this word means. I know what renal means, so that's kidney function. So the genitourinary system, organ system of the reproductive organs and the urinary system. Okay.
Because they're in the same general area of the body.
In the same general area. Yeah. Okay. So we know that this has to do with kidney and sex organ and urinary organ function. Right. Skeletal growth, growth in children. This might help answer our question here as well, right? Ketogenic diet mechanism, that might be of importance. And then conclusions. And we have our author contributions, we have our funding source, conflicts of interests, and then all of our references. Okay, so we have a pretty good idea of the layout of this paper. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to skim the hotspots. Okay. So we're going to go to the last paragraph of the introduction, and we're going to find the main hypothesis. Now, because we're looking at a review, this probably won't have a main hypothesis. So the introduction here is only 2 paragraphs long, so we might just go to the last sentence. ASM. So we need to find out what ASM is. Anti-epileptic drugs, okay, or anti-seizure medications. Okay, so these anti-seizure medications had fewer side effects than those previously available. They were much easier to adhere to than a restrictive diet. Ketogenic diet regained popularity in the 1990s after promising research was published. Nonprofit therapies, people epilepsy, created after a 2-year-old child was cured of his epilepsy after being on the therapy. So this one's not going to give us a hypothesis. Let's see if we'll go to, let's do this. Ketogenic diet, weight loss. Now, this is gonna, you can see all my, I've already looked at some of these. This is a meta-analysis. We don't want that. Meta-analysis. Okay. So this might be a trial. So what I'm looking for would be a control trial, so that we can get a look at. You know what? You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna look up something we've already looked at before. Yeah. Here we go. All right. So this is McCann. This is one of our artificial food color trials that we looked at. And so within the introduction, so the present community-based double-blinded placebo-controlled food challenge was designed to extend the age range study to include 8 and 9-year-old children to determine whether the effects could also be detected in middle childhood. So that that sentence right there, okay, having just skimmed the introduction within this, tells you what the hypothesis is here, the main hypothesis. So this is the continuation of the, I forget which one it is, but they only looked at 3-year-old children with the food coloring, right? And the results from that. And so the main hypothesis here is they want to see whether or not those effects can be detected in middle childhood, in 8 and 9-year-olds. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So last paragraph in the introduction to find the main hypothesis. Usually it's within the last sentence. Participant characteristics in the methods section. All right. So if we're looking at a review, the participants are going to be other studies. Okay. And we can see that there's a whole bunch of numbers here, and these are the studies that are going to be referenced within. And so we might just click on some of these and see. This paper offers registered dietitian nutritionist insights into the history of ketogenic diet therapy, right? So that's not a trial that we're interested in looking at. All right, but let's pull up. Not that one. Where'd you go? Top. All right, participant characteristics within the methods section. All right, so our participants right here usually will be labeled participants. So who are our participants? 3-year-olds and 8 and 9-year-olds from Southampton, UK. And right, that's about study was population. So we want to know whether or not they had ADHD. So we might look a little bit more. All right, so we have 3-year-old and 8 and 9-year-olds was drawn from the population of children aged between 3 years and 4 years, 2 months, registered in early year settings. So nurseries, day nurseries, preschool groups, and play groups. So we know where they were selecting these 3-year-olds from, and the children aged between 8 and 9 attending schools in Southampton, UK. So we know that these were children basically from the broader population. All right. And so as we continue going through this process, what I like to do, I'm not going to tell anybody what to do here, but what I like to do is I like to put together the story of what happened during this trial. Does that make sense? And
it does to me.
So
Yes.
as I'm going through, what I want to be able to do is to be able to tell the story of what happened here. Who were the participants? What are their specific characteristics? What happened during the trial? All that stuff, right? All right, so our main results, what are the primary, and if there are any secondary outcomes? So let's look, and usually those will be study design. All right, so this is within subject crossover between 2 mixes, A and B, and a placebo drink. We know that mix A contained this much, mix B contained this much, and then mix A for the 8 and 9-year-olds, we can see that there's a difference there. Mix B for the 8 and 9-year-olds, we can see there's a difference there. It tells us some other information. All right. And we're just skimming right now. We're not reading this. We're just skimming the hotspots. All right. So primary outcomes, secondary outcomes. We're looking for those things. And so this is probably where we're going to find it here. Our
Yep.
global hyperactivity aggregate. All right. So the measures of behavior were used to calculate global hyperactivity aggregate scores. All right. So those are going to be, there's probably not any secondary, and sometimes they will tell you these are the primary outcomes that we're interested in. These are the secondary outcomes. Sometimes they don't. You'll just have to see specifically what they were looking at were these hyperactivity scores, right?
Mhm.
So that's the primary outcome is hyperactivity scores. Secondary outcomes, this one didn't have any figures, graphs, and charts. So let's go back. Let's see, we already have a graph here. All right, what does this tell us? What is this graph telling us? So
Chart.
this is kind of, yes, what is this chart telling us? So this seems to be just some basic information about the participants. How many of them are white? How many of them are not white? How many are missing data? What's the marital status of their parents? NSSC, that would be something we'd have to go in and find out what that means for the father. What percent have higher occupations, intermediate, lower? All right, so that's what that chart tells us. We have another one here. What's this one telling us? Right, mix A, mix B, placebo. Okay, so we have some outcomes here. We have it separated by 3 and 8 3-year-olds and the 8 and 9-year-olds. We have some difference here. We have an entire sample, 85%. We have a complete case. Okay, so we're getting a layout. We're looking at what some of these charts and graphs might be telling us. Okay, we have some graphs over here. What are these things telling us? Entire sample, group with 85% consumption, complete case. Okay, well, we saw that up here. So this graph relates to that chart. All right, we have estimated marginal means. So we can see by just skimming some stuff, we're starting to get a lot of information here,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So we're just skimming these things, and we didn't go to the conclusion because it's not something we're really interested in yet. You could go there and you could look that up. We're just trying to skim some stuff. All right. So by now, if we were looking at a randomized control trial on the ketogenic diet, just because we couldn't find one doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And we looked in that paper, just by skimming some hotspots, we'd be able to tell very quickly whether or not this paper is worth the extra time to go ahead and read the full text of it. All right.
Right.
And we already, so even looking at this one here, which is on the children and food color, we have a pretty good idea of what's going on within this trial. Okay. So we know who the participants are. We know what the primary outcome was. They're looking at hyperactivity scores. We know that they have two mixes and a placebo. Okay. We know that mix A was different from mix B, and we know that it's different between the 3-year-olds and the 8 and 9-year-olds. So we have a good amount of information about this paper already. All right. So this is where we come down and we read this thing in detail. So if you've gone through all this process here so far, and when I'm going through this process, literally this might take me 5 or 10 minutes. All right, to get to this point of whether I'm going to decide to read this paper in detail. Okay.
Right.
So this is the part where you're going to have to take your time. Okay. Read a few sentences. And again, try to tell the story of what's happening during this trial. You're not going to be able to do tell the whole story until you get through the whole thing, but you might want to read a few sentences, and then your teacher coming up in school used to probably always tell you, like, tell me what that means, right? Repeat it back to me. So you want to be able to read some of this stuff, a few sentences, a paragraph, and then be able to put it in your own words. Tell me in layman's term what's happening here. You want to focus on answering your questions. Okay. And so I started out, this is the way I was taught to do it. It started out with a piece of paper, and I draw a plus sign, right? Split it into quadrants. And I might put 4 questions in there. okay? Which we go back to our question to ask before. What's the main hypothesis in this paper? All right, so that's in quadrant one. Who are the participants? What are their characteristics? What's the sample size, setting, and duration? What are the primary outcomes that would go on our lower left quadrant? And then what are the results in our bottom right quadrant? So as I'm reading this paper in detail, I'm going through and I'm answering those questions. What's the main hypothesis? Well, we know the main hypothesis for this McCann study was to determine whether or not you could see the effects of the artificial food coloring on hyperactivity scores in 8 and 9-year-olds. And we could say that because it was the same authors, we already have some previous knowledge here. But as you read through this paper, you would find that they did find an increase in hyperactivity scores in the previous paper. This paper here, right, is kind of a an extended paper, an extended version of that previous paper. So the hypothesis for them, more than likely, is going to be that we will be able to determine to see these hyperactivity changes in 8 and 9-year-olds, not just 3-year-olds. All right. Who are our participants? We know who the participants are. And as we start reading this further, right, we would start to know how many there are. So we can see parents of 898 children, parents of 633 children. All right. So we start to fill in a lot of the questions that we've asked ourselves as we're reading through this thing.
Right.
All right. Actively read. Again, read a little bit, process the information, try to tell what's happening in your own words. Read the introduction and get a sense of how the authors are framing the paper. Again, there's always going to be some amount of spin or bias to something because what you were dealing with is human beings, right? So read the introduction, get a sense of how the authors are going to frame the paper. You may have gone through this whole process of skimming and everything and decided you want to read this paper. You read the introduction and it tells you something like, with how wonderful the ketogenic diet is, it's just unbelievable why doctors aren't prescribing this to their patients more, right? If I get to the right, if I get to the point where I'm going to read a paper and I read that in the introduction, all right, we're throwing that out the window.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Read the methods, consider the framing, and the study specific factors and issues. This may be something that you get better at over time as you read more papers and you develop a sense of how things are done and what methods maybe produce better results. So as far as like trial design goes, so I would much rather see a blinded trial than a non-blinded trial. I would much rather see a double-blinded trial than a blinded trial. I would much rather see a double-blinded placebo-controlled trial than the other things. I would much rather see a double-blinded placebo-controlled crossover trial, right?
Right.
So as you start to read things, you'll start to get a better handle on all of that stuff. But read the methods. So you want to know how they did things. And again, this is part of the active process where you're going to read it, and just like where I didn't know what that word was, I've never seen that before. Google some stuff. If you come across a word or a sentence that you don't know, look it up, make sure that you know what that means before moving on. Okay. And the main results. The main results, are they clinically meaningful? So we do want to know whether something is statistically significant or not, and you'll often find that in the abstract. We talk about that a lot, right? So there was a significant difference between diet X and diet Y. And what they're talking about is the statistical significance, but we want to make sure that the results are clinically meaningful. So I did a review on casein protein and its effect on gastrointestinal. So basically, whether A2 protein versus A1. So A1 is the kind we get in the grocery store. That's what you're used to. And then there's this A2 protein, which comes from a specific type of cow. It's supposed to be, quote unquote, less inflammatory. It's supposed to produce better results for people who have digestion issues. And so as I looked through many of these studies, what I saw was that the results, while the A2 casein did produce a statistically significant benefit towards digestion, it wasn't clinically meaningful because they were reporting it on a Bristol stool scale. And so, like, perfect poop would be between a 3 and a 4. And as the people went through the trial, they reported a 3 on A1 protein and a 3.5 on A2. So is it statistically significant? Yeah. Is it clinically meaningful? No. Like if we
No.
swapped all of the milk to A2 protein, we're not
Yes.
going to suddenly, you know what I mean? If you're not
Yes.
keeping score of what your poop looks like,
Yep.
you're probably not even going to notice the difference. What are the confidence intervals? Confidence intervals are very important in telling you basically how much confidence you can have within something. All right. So as we look at the confidence intervals for these results here, so let's look at mix A versus placebo. So a confidence interval that crosses the 0 line is statistically insignificant. If it does not touch the 0 line, or sometimes it's a 1, but we call it the null line, then it is statistically significant. So right here for mix A, this would be reported as a statistically significant difference. But we look at the confidence intervals and we see that the lower one is 0.01, right? That is probably the thickness of the null line away from the null
Yeah.
line.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So
1/100th. Yeah.
yes. So how statistically significant exactly was this? And then we see that it goes from 0.01 to 0.39. Now, as you get better at the more you see confidence intervals, the more you're going to see that that's quite a wide range, 0.01 to 0.39. And what that means is that this result, this 0.2, actually could fall anywhere within the confidence intervals. Okay. So what we really, really like to see is very, very tight and narrow. So if this was a 0.2, and the confidence interval, say it was 0.17 to 0.23,
Mhm.
I would have much, much more confidence in those results
Right.
versus what we're seeing here, right? And having it being at 0.01, I might even question whether or not somebody should probably redo the math on this
Right.
because it's so close to the null line,
Right. Right.
right? What are the secondary outcomes? So sometimes things will report secondary outcomes. So they may look at, let's say that this one we're looking at is global hyperactivity scores, and maybe they also, as a secondary thing, so this one actually they did take cheek swab samples, right? So they
Yes.
could have reported something as a secondary. They actually did a whole second paper on it, but there could have been a secondary outcome. So you may see something in there like they were looking at hyperactivity, but maybe they were also checking digestion in these kids. Did digestion improve on the artificial food coloring free diet? So those are some things to look for. Adverse effects. You definitely want to look for adverse effects if those are reported. All right. So in this one, um, let's see. We know the adverse effects was in here because we skimmed the layout, right? And we did see that adverse effects. Various ketogenic diets are reported in a large percent of children and are often cited as a reason for participants dropping out of trial. Okay, interesting thing here, right? So we're switching over to the ketogenic diet. Adverse effects of the various ketogenic diet trials are reported in a large percentage of children and are often cited as a reason for participants dropping out of trials. So apparently, adverse effects for ketogenic diets in the treatment of epilepsy in children is a big problem. Okay, so going back to my little conversation on Twitter regarding the zero carbohydrates for brain function. So this is something new, right? This might be something that we need to think about and bring up. Are these adverse effects? So we want to know what those are. Let's see. More than 40 categories of adverse effects were identified with gastrointestinal, cardiovascular, renal, so that one, genitourinary, so basically the sex organ, urinary function, and skeletal being the most common. So those seem to be maybe some pretty big issues as far as adverse effects go. All right, so look up adverse effects. The tables, figures, and graphs. This is where all of the details are. So there is going to be a results section. Let me see if we can find it in here. It should be labeled results. Here we go, results. Okay, so you often find it. Results, all of these things are, so they have statistical analysis. Most people, that may be something you'd look into learning later on, but you can get through most of the methods, the participants, the results. All right, so as you read the results, the authors are generally just going to kind of report what they found, right? We found a statistical significance between mix A and mix B, or mix A and placebo, blah, 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 blah. When you get into the tables and the charts, that's where the details really lie. This is where you're able to pick things apart. Okay, so there was a statistical significance between mix A and the placebo. Okay, so how are they getting that difference? And we see that over here. Okay, but mix A compared to baseline, we actually see that hyperactivity was lower. Okay, that's interesting. So that's not something that's going to be reported in the results section. All right.
Right.
So the tables, charts, and graphs, that's where the details are. You want to spend a lot of time looking at those. And you'll see a lot of times when we look at something, you know, the first thing that comes to my mind is the seed oil episode that we did where we saw maybe C-reactive protein either increased or decreased based on the amount of linoleic acid in the diet.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. In regards to what is the normal reference range, how much did that change? Did it leave the normal reference range? Did it go outside of it? Did it put somebody into a different risk category?
Right.
Those are things that you want to question. All right, this is where you can scrutinize the results without the bias or framing from the authors. Again, as they write things out in the results section, most of the time they're just going to report what they found. A lot of times they'll leave something out. Right? So like they left out, so they'll report that there was a statistically significant difference between mix A and the placebo, but what they won't tell you is that there was actually a reduction in hyperactivity under all of those effects from baseline.
Right.
All right. The discussion now, the discussion is usually where the authors will tell you their opinions, their feelings, and the way that they are interpreting the results. So you want to ask yourself some questions as you read the discussion. Is the way that they're talking about the results reflective of the results? Okay. Did you come to the same conclusion that the authors did, or are the authors, you know, maybe putting that same bias that you saw in the introduction, you're seeing it in the discussion section? Are they over extrapolating, right? So as we look at the results for this food coloring trial, we see that there just isn't that much difference happening here. And so if the authors are reporting that, hey, by eliminating food colors from the food supply, we could see a huge reduction in hyperactivity from children, and there would be this massive decline in ADHD diagnoses, right? Are they over extrapolating these results?
This
Are
next
they
one is one that jumps out on me.
Are they
They're
spinning the
it.
results to lead to a conclusion that the results don't support? This doesn't happen a whole bunch. I have seen it happen. So it is something to look out for. Okay. I can't think of a specific example, but I have seen it happen where I'll read the discussion and they'll come to a conclusion. I'll be like, wait a minute,
How'd you get that?
how'd you get there? Yeah. Okay, and you don't have to agree or accept the way that they have interpreted the results. Okay,
Right.
You have the ability to make your own decisions and come to your own conclusions from this stuff.
Exactly.
All right, be critical of this stuff. How does this compare to other papers you read? If it's the first one or maybe the second one, you don't have a lot of experience. But as you read more and more papers, you're going to be able to see particularly regarding specific things like ketogenic diets and epilepsy. So if that's something that you're interested in and you start reading a bunch of papers and you're getting into, your 30th paper, you're certainly going to start to see a theme emerge between ketogenic diets and epilepsy treatment. And so as you're reading a new paper, you might think about, okay, how does this fit in with the rest of everything that I've read, right? Does this go against everything that I've seen so far? Does it fit into it? Does this add something new? All right. Especially if you like the results. Okay. So if you read something and you end up really, really liking the results that came out of this, it may be time to be a little bit more critical about this. Okay. Don't just read stuff to confirm your bias. Okay. And this goes the same way. If you didn't like the results, a lot of times people will read something, I don't like the results because this doesn't confirm my bias. So they stop reading it or they disregard it. Um, that might be a time to reevaluate some things, right? Be a little bit more critical about this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Step 4. You've read this thing. All right. You read the whole text. You looked at the tables, charts, and graphs. It's time to chew it over. Put it away. All right. And think about it a little bit. How does it fit in a wider context? Is there a related research question you came up with while you were reading? Okay. So something that, just because it's recent, the food coloring issue that came up for me is this idea of nutrient deficiency that's happening in children. Okay. Because a diet high in food coloring might necessarily be deficient within certain nutrients. And so, another research question that came up to me is like, what might be the impact of a diet that probably would be a little bit more refined, maybe like breakfast cereals, but is fortified for children, right? As opposed to maybe gummy bears and fruit drinks and stuff like that, right? So,
Yeah.
so would that have a different impact? So even though breakfast cereals and foods like that might have food colorings in them, but they're fortified to provide nutritional adequacy, what are the results that would come from that? You might read some of the papers that are referenced within the paper, right? So a lot of them are going to talk about papers that have research that has been done previously, and they're going to provide references. You might take a skim through some of those references. Okay. You might look up. So if somebody used food frequency questionnaires, you might look at the study on how that was validated. Okay. And you might find that their validation method is crap. Okay. And you might look at other trials that the authors say found similar results. So going back to the seed oil thing, there was one paper that we read where it talked about one result. I can't remember what it was, but it referenced some similar results found in another paper. And when you read that one, it was like, oh, well, we found benefits in putting these seed oils in. Okay. Have a quick skim of other things that come to mind. So some other things that come to mind, just like the breakfast cereals for me, right? You could do a quick Google search. You might do a quick PubMed search or something like that. Have a quick skim, see if there's anything that comes up that might provide more information for you. How does it fit into the whole field? Again, this is something you might have to gain experience on as you read more. But, does it fit within the field, or is it going contrary to everything that we know up to this point? Does it add something new, or does it build on what we already know? And then talk about it. Ask questions from others, get opinions on things. There are a lot of social media groups that you can get into where researchers will be happy to answer questions and talk about things. You may know other people who are interested in this stuff. Talk it over. All right. Step 5, we have a review or a second read. Okay. So I actually will spend, I've got it down to about a week now where I'll read a single paper. It'll take me an entire week and I'll read that thing 2 or 3 times. So as I bring up a bunch of stuff that we've seen and I have all these highlights, I don't put all these highlights in the first time I read the thing. You can see there's a lot of highlighting that goes on in here, and that happens over 2 or 3 readings. So it takes me 2 or 3 times of reading this thing, thinking about it, building the story in my mind, what happened at the start of the trial, going all the way through. Can I tell the story of how this trial happened? Right. And as you can see, more and more things get highlighted, more information comes out. I start to get a better understanding of things. Okay, this is interesting. I didn't see that before. Is this shown in this chart or this graph? What does that result show me? Were all of your answers, or were all of your questions sufficiently answered? Right. So
Yeah,
having
right,
that sheet of paper where you actually have the questions written out and you're going through and answering those questions, were all of your questions sufficiently answered? You might be left with a question that's unanswered. All right. And so you may have to go look at something else.
you might
Do the
even be
tables.
dazzled and answered everything except what
Yeah,
your
yeah.
question
It may
was.
have given you more. Do the tables, charts, and graphs show statistically or clinically meaningful results? If it's blood markers, like we already talked about this. Did certain blood marker values go out of range? Did they put someone into a different risk category or not?
Right,
Did they just stay within the normal range?
right, right,
Are the results expected for the participants? Okay, so if we're looking at something like cardiovascular disease and we're looking at 35 to 40-year-olds, is,
right,
you know, are heart attacks and strokes expected for 35 and 40-year-olds? No. But if you're looking at a trial and there's a large number of them in there, that might be an unexpected result. Whoa,
mm,
why are all these 35 and 40-year-olds getting heart attacks and strokes?
right,
Right?
right,
Maybe you're looking at saturated fat and its influence on heart attacks and strokes, but the participants are 35 and 40-year-olds, and you might ask yourself, would I expect to see heart attacks and strokes in 35 and 40-year-olds? No. So if this trial is telling me that there's no effect of saturated fat on heart attacks and strokes, well, of course not. We wouldn't expect to see it in those participants, right? If they're 65 to 80-year-old, we would expect to see results from that.
right, right, right. Yep.
All right, man. So that's what I got. 5 steps. It's kind of a lot, but that's how you get the most information out of a paper. Um, and it's a skill. It's a skill you have to build. You have to work on it. You have to do it over and over and over. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. When I first started, like really applying these steps and really reading a paper and writing stuff down, like I had a notebook. Like I said, I had a piece of paper, split it into quadrants. I'm writing questions. I'm answering questions as I go. I don't have to do that so much now. I also use the highlighting and I'll put little notes in there within the software that I use. So you guys can use it's just like a PDF editor that I use, right? But it
Right,
allows me to highlight, it allows me to put notes in there. And that's kind of what I use now. So my notes stay with that specific paper. So if I have to go back to it, I just pull that paper up. I can click on all my notes. I can look at all my highlighting. I know what the yellow highlighting means for me. I know what the green highlighting means for me, right? You'll develop your own thing. And yeah, when I first started out, it maybe took 3 weeks or something to really get a grip on what a paper was telling me, right? What
right.
what the actual thing, what is this paper actually telling me rather than what is this influencer telling me and they just cited this thing.
That's good stuff, man. That's a lot, but that's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's good
All right.
stuff.
So hopefully this helps you guys. I am very interested in building an audience that can, decipher for their own and not just rely on what social media influencers are telling you, because quite frankly, there's just a bunch of bad information going around out there.
Yep.
Um, I see stuff all the time that I just have to quite like, what? Where on earth are you getting that from?
Yeah.
All right. So you guys know now propositional logic to formalize arguments.
That doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Logical inference.
Yep.
Okay. arguments are deductive, inductive, or abductive. How is that person getting to that conclusion? You can also use inference to determine whether or not their arguments are valid or sound. All right. Is this premise true? Is this conclusion true? All right. You can use inference to do that. Using fallacies, both the formal and the informal, to determine validity and soundness of arguments. And if everything passes all of those tests, then now we know how to read a paper. Meta-analyses and systematic reviews are a little bit different, but for the most part, reviews, meta-analyses, same stuff applies. Using all of those methods, go through forest plots. You may have to look up how to do that. We may have a different, video on how to read a meta-analysis, but you'll get the gist of it. You can read a meta-analysis just fine and kind of walk away with some good information from that. All right, man. Any questions? Anything to add?
Not for me. I think I added everything I had up front, so it's good. It's good.
These things are skills. You do have to do them to get better at them, but I'm telling you, it won't really take you very long. And once that light bulb comes on, it becomes very easy, and you also won't think about things the same way again. You won't sit down and have a conversation with another human being the same way ever again.
That's the truth. That's the truth. I can't tell you how many people I look at now and go, what?
I talk to people and I'm formalizing their things in my head all the time, and I have to just refrain from don't go through it. All right. Very good.
Good stuff, man. Awesome.
All right. Hope somebody's mind was blown. This might not have been a mind-blowing revelational thing today. Hope somebody takes something away from this, and we will see you guys next time. Coach Lamby and Dwayne out.
Out.